And we are live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Homeroom. And the question is, does DEI have a blind spot? We are leading up to what's going to happen on Sunday. So, what I hope we can cover in this brief hour is a prelude to our actual 2 hour live conference. So, I want to talk about the deep history of diversity, equity, and inclusion from the lens of disabled students. So, what does that really look like? Is the question of the day. How has America generally treated students with disabilities? And how has history marched to recognize that students with disabilities are part of diversity, equity, and inclusion? And I think it really, how would I say, highlights the weak spot in DEI. If you haven't been paying attention, we've been doing a multi-part series, and this week represents the last week that we are getting into this. So this week has really focused around the fringes of diversity, equity, and inclusion, where DEI goes too far. And today, what I hope we can unpack is one area where DEI probably is not going far enough, which is in the disabled community. So there is a bit of a sordid history, a few court cases, major court cases that I want to talk about, as well as some of the laws that have been passed that, how do I say, protect the community of disabled students. But yet it seems like students with disabilities don't quite intersect very well with the DEI. It's it's a really interesting uh I don't know what that means. Sorry, I have something on my screen. Allow Google Chrome to I'm not going to allow that. We'll see what happens. Um I will check the chat. Good morning, Leticia. Glad to see you. It's gonna be a doozy today. It's not gonna be a comfortable conversation. So I'm glad that you're here to rein me in. And I see Carla is over here on the app. So let me give greetings to you very quickly, Carla. Good morning. How are you? Glad that you're here. Any first takes to this topic?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Um, no, I'm interested in hearing more about it. I guess I've never thought about it from the perspective of DEI and students with disabilities because I thought there were opportunities for students with disabilities, but maybe I'm going to learn something today. So I'm listening intently for now.
Well, I'm glad that you're here. And I'll tell you, I had to learn something. It is a glaring blind spot, not to how do I say, not to coin a phrase as it relates to students with disabilities, but and we've been talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you guys, for quite some time, weeks now. I'm on this 5 week consistency campaign, this challenge that I've set, that has been set before me, and I'm on week 4. Haven't missed a day. I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I'm pretty proud of this old man. um, and throughout that entire thing, when I've done the research, when I've looked into it, it seems like issues of race and issues of gender tend to dominate the conversation regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. But come to find out, disabilities or people with disabilities, I should say, is the largest disaggregated community, bigger than race, bigger than gender, because disability is no respecter of race or gender. So it crosses all of those demographics and really is the largest group. And yet, when it comes to optics, most disabilities actually are invisible. So when you want to cut a commercial, when you want to post a meme, when you want to put up a photo, even when you use even in my attempt to try to demonstrate this topic using ChatGPT and AI, it's hard to generate an image that effectively highlights someone with general anxiety disorder or a learning disability like dyslexia. Like, what does that look like? So, from an optics perspective, diversity, equity, and inclusion for students with disabilities is a difficult thing to capture in a meme. You actually have to genuinely care about the community in order to provide them the diversity, the equity, and the sense of inclusion that we parrot, that the DI community parrots, that they're all about. So it's really quite interesting. I think I'm going to start with an audio clip just to sort of set the stage, and then we can go from there. Before I do that, Leticia over on YouTube says opening the aperture of DEI and serving students with disabilities is exactly what we are here to do. So let's shed a light on it. Before I do that, I want to post the, excuse me one second, guys. I want to post the link to folks and guys prefer a visual experience. And if you're sure that you're in listen only mode, you can click on the link and watch this very experience because we're live streaming over on YouTube. If you haven't done so, I would appreciate your support there. Why? Because Mr. Thompson is at 97 subscribers on YouTube. So I'm marching towards my first goal of 100 subscribers. Maybe you can help by going over to at Educator's House on YouTube and dropping a subscription. I would appreciate your support there. Me, my mama, my cousins, like I've tapped all my friends and family. And now I need your support. So if you could jump on over there and subscribe, that would be amazing support and help me to reach my goal. Okay, the other thing that I want to do is acknowledge those who are on YouTube. I appreciate your patience and have struggled tremendously to figure out how to get the audio to work when I play these clips, and I haven't quite figured it out. So now that I am on this mission, keeping the closed captions on has been it's something that I've already figured out, but I want to get the audio right so that we can all have the same experience. Okay, I don't want to spend too much more time, but I do want to give greetings to those who may be catching us for the first time. Educators House, welcome. We are the home for professional educators of all stripes, parents of school-aged children, K through 16, as well as community members who are concerned about what's really going on in education. Doesn't take much of a Google search to realize that our kids can't read and they can't do math. And when you disaggregate by community, you start to see some real glaring problems. And so we are that courageous front that's peeling back the layers and creating a safe space for educators to actually talk about the critical issues in education. If you've ever been in what's called PD or a faculty meeting, you realize that we're not really talking about what's important. We're talking about the mundane and the right now. So we're taking a step back and looking at where are the real trends as the paradigm shifts. Because I believe during this paradigm shift if we as educators don't step into this gap and really push it in the direction during the chaos of the transition between what education was and what education will be, then we're going to miss our critical and golden opportunity to really make positive change. And I think the only way that we could do that is together. And I think the most important community to do that are those of us who are on the front lines. So if any of that applies to you, you're definitely in the right place. And I'm glad that you're here. All right. So let me get to the first clip. It's an audio clip which talks about the very thing that we're looking at, and he gives us a bit of context. So let's enjoy this clip. I'm going to stop right there. Spoiler alert. Chances are you're going to experience a disability at some point in your life. And so, whether or not this is optics or a real thing starts to become glaringly obvious because so many of us are going to be impacted by diversity, by a disability. And so, with that, I'm going to go back a little bit in history, provide some valuable information to what's going on in the disability community, especially as it relates to issues of education. And then that might bring up some areas for us to really speak on it. Keep in mind that this is a prelude. I hope to be laying the groundwork for what's happening on Sunday. So on Sunday, June 8th, I have scheduled a special guest. Her name is Tiffany Martin. She is blind and a business owner in the tech space. She has a company called Visio. It's not right in front of me. Excuse me. I'll allow her to give a full introduction when we see her on Sunday, but I just want you to put it on your calendar. We'll be back here Sunday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, going to our live professional grade conference to really unpack this issue of disability and accessibility over the course of time and how DEI intersects with that. Okay, but before we get into that, since we have each other, let's start with some historical context. So, would you believe, for example, how do I want to ask it in the form of a question? When do you think the nation actually started creating protections for students with disabilities? Is your reflection question. What I will tell you is it certainly did not start before the 1970s. So this is not like way back in slavery time when, my ancestors got rights. This is not it's not that kind of story. This is during my lived experience is when students with disabilities got on the radar. What that means is the general principle for most schools was out of sight, out of mind. Students with disabilities were regularly and regularly excluded from the public education system. So public education has been around for quite a while. We talked about compulsory education in a prior experience, so you might want to go to the playlist on YouTube and kind of check out how we've been marching this down. But when it comes to denying students with disabilities enrollment, expelling them, refusing to provide them services, this was regular practice. And this is one of the significant concerns that we see with Donald Trump rolling back these DEI protections for students even now, because when states and not the federal government has oversight, we might see what would I call it? This same thing, the refusal of services. It already exists in some charter schools, and most private schools are not compelled to have a special education department. Whereas a public school, and we'll see when we march down this history, public schools have an obligation, a legal obligation, a constitutional obligation to care for students with disabilities because they're just as American and have equal protection under the law, according to the Constitution itself. And so when private schools who don't fall under that expectation, they often don't have space for students with disabilities. And if they do, it's at their convenience. And so this is why we see so many people raising the red flags and the alarms regarding what's happening with special education and these not only DEI rollbacks, but the push towards privatization. So what did they do? Because again, and we've kind of talked about the fact that people have to go to work. So these students, and I'll kind of talk about what was identified as a disability back then, but they would often go to institutions. They would go to medical facilities. So state-run facilities like the Willowbrook State School in New York, charity-run asylums was actually a term back then. They were called training schools. Um, they sometimes they would be boarding situations and sometimes they would be day schools, but oftentimes there was no actual academic curriculum. It was more like formal babysitting, or on the extreme levels of mental disorder, it could be our images of padded walls and taking pills was what was happening. And I'll tell you, that's what was happening. And so while when I use a term like segregation, for example, we think about that in terms of race. African Americans did not have access to schools until the desegregation movement in the 1960s. Similarly, students with disabilities were also segregated. There were signs back in the day: no blacks, no Jews. And but they should have put no disabled on the sign as well. It's been an often unspoken community. And so all of these trends are sort of converging when it comes to the disabled community. And so it's exciting to kind of close out our journey on diversity, equity, and inclusion when it comes to the disabled community. So the bottom line here is, before the 1970s, disability was not seen as a civil rights issue. Instead, it was treated like a problem. It was hidden, segregated. And when you compound that by racism, by poverty, then you start to see that there was a shift from medical control to civil rights, from isolation to access, if you will. So I guess the question that I want to ask, let me give greetings to the room before you and I cook, and see if anyone wants to come up and join this conversation. Carla, I see Prophecy 25, Mimi Taylor, Ash is in the building. Glad to see you back. Sav and One Chapter in 1 hour. Oh, they actually have live rooms, One Chapter in 1 hour. So it's great to see you here as well. I'm glad that you made it. If any of you guys want to come up, because perhaps you have a story, and that's really what I want to hear, because it's hard to get research on this. But if you have a story about a student who has a disability, you yourself going through school, what was that like? If you observe students with disabilities while you were at school and maybe it didn't apply to you, I'd love to hear how, in your lived experience, you saw students with disabilities being treated, in particular in the education space, but even more broadly. Um, I'd love to have you come up and join this conversation. There's a lot of shame, as Leticia talks about, associated with students with disabilities. It's something that we really don't talk about. So, um, Carla, I don't know if anything comes up for you, but do you have any personal anecdotes with students with disabilities, or issues of access for students along those lines? It seems like all of us either had a personal experience, or we know of some kind of experience that we either observed or heard about. So I wonder, Carla, if you have something.
Yeah, thanks. I think in general, now that you're talking about it, where I saw it, there may have been children who were struggling to read, or to write. And I can think back, I don't know that there were times where there was even the exploration of the possibility of a learning disability. Sometimes they were labeled as slow.
Mhm.
And as a result, you could see those children withdraw. And now that I'm thinking back, that had to be a pretty uncomfortable place to be in. But at the time, I don't think it was identified as possible learning disabilities. I think they were just um, called slow, or not willing to participate, lazy. They were labeled with those types of terms, and maybe it was because the teachers themselves didn't even know what to do.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. The Our society, and especially our schools, were not built from an infrastructure perspective to include students with disabilities. And as we mentioned in our previous session, when you talk about that factory model and preparing for that industrial revolution, and pulling the lever to stamp the steel type of society that we lived in then, there certainly was not room in the workplace, let alone room in the school place for students with disabilities. So, what I heard you say but not say is the term retarded. That has become almost as taboo, if not more taboo than the N word, right? Because a lot of people in my community still use that word. But the word retarded actually was a typical thing. My mentor, Les Brown, he was labeled as educable mentally retarded back then. He was called the dumb twin by his peers. And so this is something that we see in our very own lived experience. And I'm going to highlight some of the landmark cases that brought diversity, equity, and inclusion and the disabled community into to crash into each other, if that starts to make sense. So I see that Ty Tutoring came up onto the stage as well as One Chapter in 1 Hour. I'd like to invite you guys up. Greetings to the space, you guys. I'm glad that you all are here. If you already have something to contribute to this topic, I'll pass the mic, or you can just give greetings and introduce yourself for the good of the group and the recording. And then we can move into some of the landmark cases. So, Ty Tutoring, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit of your context, and if you have anything to share regarding the blind spot of DEI regarding the disabled community, I would appreciate your share. If you're ready, the mic is yours.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys in this space. So I'm Nikki Hernandez, and I'm a full-time teacher. I'm going into year 13 this coming year, teaching in a rural community in Virginia. And because of the deficiencies in education, I decided to take things into my own hands and start my own tutoring company, Turning the Tide Tutoring. And then as far as this topic, it's an interesting topic for me because I have noticed that a lot of educators that are the department chairs in schools, they often teach, not always, of course, but they often teach the highest level kids, which is amazing. That's great. And we need great educators for everyone. And but what I have noticed is that those individuals are not the ones that are the most equipped to provide structure, advice, and support to the teachers who don't teach those kids, who
Mm.
teach the kids who may have some significant disabilities or some challenges or things like that. So I just wanted to point that out. Nothing wrong with it, of course, just an observation.
No, it's a fair observation, and I question whether there's nothing wrong with that. You know, I have also been in schools where we, how would I say, we track the students, and as you mentioned, there's value in that. But you know, that high track, the IB, the AP track is where you get the most resources. You know, air quotes, the best teachers. You also see some levels of segregation there. Um, I've also been in schools that tend to teach very much to the middle. So those gifted students, which also belong in special education, for the record, as well as our low performing students, end up getting left behind to teach this invisible middle student. You know, what I can tell you is this: I have very rarely in my 20 plus year career in the classroom found a school that really has centered students with different abilities and the spectrum of what would I call it, special education departments in terms of their resources, their funding, their capacity to support um, is not consistent. And I have taught across the country for decades, and it is a real box of chocolates when it comes to finding a school that has a fair and appropriate learning environment for students with different abilities. So that's my experience. So I appreciate your share. One Chapter in 1 Hour. Welcome up to the stage. Please introduce yourself and let us know what comes up for you.
Hey, Hassan, it's Miranda,
Hey,
Carla,
Miranda.
and you said your name so quickly, but congrats on that your tutoring company. All of our kiddos need tutors. My daughter is a person with an intellectual disability, and she was in the Dallas Fort Worth, well, a suburb. We lived in a suburb there. We did it all. We started out with Catholic school, a special school specifically for kiddos with intellectual disabilities. And that school was great. They were so expensive every year, you know. They kept going up on tuition, and we just couldn't keep up.
Mm,
And then we tried a charter school, and she eventually landed at a public school. But now that I'm separated, I'm living in Louisiana. I'm like in rural Northwest Louisiana, and she's in school here. She's in high school. And it really feels like they're not doing a whole lot. It feels like you mentioned the institutions where it was just handing out medication. It feels like handing out handouts. Like it's just everybody gets a handout,
mm,
depending on your level of expertise in math, reading, spelling, what have you, you'll get a handout. And so I joined their substitute teacher pool just to get a peek to like see what's going on in there. And I never got a call. I spent some time in third grade. That was brutal.
mm,
But where I really wanted to be was in the high school just to kind of see what's going on with her there. I've just never really been completely satisfied anywhere other than that private Catholic school, way back when. This was early on, like second, third grade, when she had an opportunity. We enrolled her there. So it's been a journey for sure. That IEP process is so complicated. I don't feel
mm,
like it has to be. And I don't know. I'm still like in the middle of it, still completely unsatisfied, still doing what I can at home while still giving her an opportunity to like just be a kid and not be a student, and me be her mom and not be her teacher.
mm,
It's just really all a balancing act, and really focusing in on right now on her giftings, like what she likes. She has a real bent for the younger kiddos. I think is because she can relate to them more. Those 4 or 5 year olds. She's an excellent babysitter.
mm,
So as we plan for a transition, she's in 11th grade. As we plan for a transition for her, I'm considering like
mhm,
childcare facilities, Head Start centers, things like that. But in this area, unemployment is so high, and adults are really working in those types of um, positions. So it's still now that we're transitioning into um, her life outside of high school, it's our grade school. It's still complicated, difficult to navigate. I feel like I need a tutor, a mentor, a coach to help her through this process too. So I'm grateful for the room and the topic. It's so good to see folks that I started Clubhouse with, like way back when, those pandemic years when there were many education
yep.
rooms on the platform. I call it the good old good days, but it was so good to see this education room here. So that's all I have to share on the topic. Back to you, Hassan. Thanks.
What a powerful share and a really relevant case study to what we're talking about here. You know, what came up for me was this issue that we hear often in the African American community, which is last hired, first fired. But now that you've brought that up, boy, maybe we in the oppression Olympics, maybe we can't claim that anymore because I can totally see how that would be a really good fit, a really solid fit for someone like your daughter. And yet, as you mentioned, with the desperation of unemployment these days, if a employer had to choose between your daughter and someone else without the intention set from diversity, equity, and inclusion, without really being mindful about making space like that, I could see how she could get pushed out of the job market, and I appreciate that share because it really broadens our perspective. Carla, what do you think? What came up for you?
As I was listening, um, I started thinking about it as we were talking about DEI as it relates to race and gender. So I started just going back, and I started thinking of actually giving it focused thought. And I would imagine that even today, with all of the laws in place, that disabled students or people still probably struggle with identity and being included and accepted, because we have not necessarily had the mind shift that will cause us to not see, to even put the label there, disabled,
Mm,
and almost making them feel as if they're special class, and that they they don't count. They're Americans. They're people. They might need support in a different way. We all need support in some areas, and it shows up differently. So maybe if we started looking at it like that, um, that would help us move things forward. Because certainly, as I think around on job places, I don't see a lot of people there that are um, disabled. Now, there are some people who have shared with me that they might have had dyslexia or things like that, but they don't share it openly. They share it privately when they
right.
trust you,
Yep.
right? Because it's almost like it's quote unquote like a dirty little secret. I
Mm,
think of like healthcare. You go into the doctor's office. What if you need to get up on the examination table and you're disabled? I remember when I used to take my mom and she was in a wheelchair. There wasn't any really provisions to even help that, right? So there's a lot of places in society that I think we need a mind shift so that we start looking at things a little differently, and we normalize this such that it's not a special class, something that's bad, and we begin to truly value differences and provide opportunities and give an opportunity for representation. We say we want to see people that look like us so we can aspire. Well, I imagine that everyone wants that. And if we're putting people in the corner and calling them, oh, retarded. I hadn't even thought of that word because it was such a negative word.
right.
Or that you're special, or you're not like the rest of the people, and you're showing pity. It's hard to find your way in that world. So
Hmm.
I for me, this was really enlightening. So I thank you for the shares.
Yeah, this has been good. Minister of Science and Tech, welcome into the space. I hope we offer you something of value. And if you haven't done so, and if you're in listen only mode, you can click the link at the top, and you can see our conversation via live stream on YouTube. Boy, let me get it. Let me push this case forward, because that trigger word is back again. So again, before the 1970s, there was no space. The disabled community was similar to the Black community, the Jewish community, in some places the Catholic community. Like, there was so much effort put in segregating and isolating people from the air quotes mainstream, right? That main model of the white Protestant male. Um, so all of us on the margins were not really considered. So this what was happening during the civil rights movement, or what should be more accurately called the human rights movement of the 60s, was a significant shift in the way that this country functioned. And here, I'll highlight two landmark cases and maybe do a deeper dive into one of them. Excuse me. So in 1971, some of us were alive back then, there was a case called the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which challenged the law that allowed public schools to deny education to children who were not, as we just heard, who hadn't reached a certain mental age. And what came out of that particular case, and it was really the first of its kind, declared that students with intellectual disabilities were entitled, they had a right to a free public education. Now let's fast forward to the following year. Now that the precedent has been set, the big case was called Mills versus Board of Education of the District of Columbia. And it made a much broader distinction on what it meant to have a disability. And so, in terms of the overview, We're talking about Washington, D.C. public schools. And I used to live in D.C. and I taught in both the Maryland and Virginia side of the district. Uh, where I think it's something like 18,000 students with disabilities were excluded, expelled, or not even allowed, or oftentimes over suspended without explanation and without due process. And so that's how the attitude was. And the city cited, as we heard in in our earlier clip, budget crises. We can't afford it, was their primary problem. And because the previous case that I mentioned, the Pennsylvania Association for Retarded Children, it set the precedent that even this population has a right to education. Well, this was a class action lawsuit at this point. So 7 children were represented. They had various disabilities, including emotional disabilities, hyperactivity, learning disabilities, etc. And the outcome of the case was a constitutional rights issue. It said under the Fifth Amendment, they did not have proper access to due process. The school just made rules. And then the 14th Amendment is dealing with equal protection under the law, and they were not equally protected. And so even though they talked about how they were overwhelmed because they didn't have the infrastructure, those students were too disruptive. We don't have the budget. There's no clear guidelines on how to support these students. And so the judge made these significant and important rulings. Number one, education is a right for all children, regardless of the cost. So, budget is not a valid excuse to not educate American citizens. Second, no child can be excluded, expelled, or suspended without some version of due process. You can't just do it. Now, no trademark violation. Sorry, Nike. When I think about what that means, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, I didn't plan on this, but it came up for me just now. You know that they are starting to pass laws that allow teachers to use, I forget exactly how it's language, but it deals with the issue of discipline. And they want to empower teachers to discipline. And this is it's a tricky thing. So just let me walk this down if you don't mind. Um, we have criticism about the lack of discipline in the schools. And because of that, our kids are acting wild right now. Our next conference series is going to be about screen time and the addictive power of screen time and how it affects our kids' brains. So I'm going to make a counter argument to discipline and really talk about the algorithm and the screens and how that's affecting student behavior. But there has been a trend. Oh, the because of, and actually Carla and I, we talked about this at our last conference with Nazi. This affirmation culture says that a student's will and whim should always be fostered and affirmed. And so that has created space for students to take advantage of that and start falling off the rails. Well, now they're passing laws that allow for discipline, which now is lowering the barriers to suspensions and expulsions. Not so much like getting the ruler and paddling them across the knuckles like the good old days, but certainly dealing with this issue of discipline. They're starting to be able to, how would I say, suspend and expel those students a lot easier. So I'm concerned about this issue of due process. All of that to say that. So the court said that the district, and then it spread to the rest of the country, they need to immediately develop and implement plans for special education. And so that is going to lay the groundwork for the IDEA Act, which we're going to talk about perhaps in the next phase, as well as, connecting the Brown versus the Board of Education, which was the Equal Protection Clause, guaranteeing meaningful opportunity for all students. In that case, it dealt with race, but now it also includes students with disabilities. And so this 1972 Mills case, it didn't just ask whether disabled students could learn, but it forced the public school system to confront, and really the rest of our society. Do they even belong somewhere outside of an institution? Do they belong walking around among the general population? And the answer is a resounding yes. And so we have made progress, but it certainly has been a journey. Um, Before I move on, I do want to play another clip. Nazi made it. I'm glad you're here because really you're the inspiration for this. Let me play the next clip, Nazi, and then I'd love to have you introduce yourself. I don't know how much you've heard because I haven't been looking at the screen now that I see you're here. Um, but yeah, I'll let you cook once I play this next clip. So I would be remiss given our journey if I didn't highlight the corporate take on this. And I really do question the corporate optics as it relates to DEI in general. And we see corporate optics playing itself in this case as well. So for those of you who may be listening to us on YouTube, I know there's an audio issue, so you'll have to keep an eye on the closed captions, and I'll do a brief recap after the clip is played. Please enjoy. So if you are watching on YouTube, very quickly, there's this podcast and they're talking about Mattel, who just released their Blind Barbie, and that came on the heels of their previously released Down syndrome Barbie. And when Blind Barbie came out, they also rolled out Black Down syndrome Barbie. And what's really interesting is their partnerships. So Mattel didn't do this on their own, but they did it in partnership with the American Foundation for the Blind and the Down Syndrome Society. So they had formal partners that represented these groups, and now they're rolling it out. So corporations have found a way to profit off of the disability market and represent, and maybe I should take the other side of that perspective and represent the disabled community through the sale of their product. So that's something that I find poetic at best. Okay. With that said, and you don't necessarily have to respond to that, Nazi, but I know that this is a space that you're in. The question on the table is, does DEI have a blind spot? And is that blind spot students with disabilities? So, with that being said, Nazi, if you're available, please introduce yourself, and I'd love to hear your general thoughts or specific reactions to what you've heard so far.
Good morning. I'm Nazi Padrov, educational diagnostician. I'm in Texas, but I've born and raised in the DC area, and so I have been always dedicated to disability awareness and helping people with disabilities, disability advocacy. What I think about that are any the whole title. I don't know that it's actually a blind spot because inclusion is referring to disabilities. If you ask me, I mean the whole inclusivity is something that people with disabilities have taught us.
Mhm.
So diversity, equity, inclusion. I think inclusivity teaches us equity, and I don't know that it's necessarily a blind spot like you're saying. Give me some more take on that.
Sure, sure, sure. No, I appreciate it. My general premise, my point of departure is what I have discussed, and maybe it's my own blind spot, so I can recognize my own bias. But based on the research that I've done, DEI seems to be really focused on issues of race and gender. But as you mentioned at our last conference, the biggest segment of disaggregated groups would be the disabled community because they cross all races and all genders, right? They're no respecter of those particular constructs. But and it also highlights for me something that Carla and I talked about, whether or not there are these systems of oppression, which means that All these definitions come out of the systems of oppression as a lens, or if there's an objective truth. Well, when you talk about a person who has a significant physical or mental handicap, that's an objective thing, you know? And so those people who are anti DEI and talk about merit only, merit, merit, you know, if it was purely merit, then my special guest who's coming on Sunday, Tiffany Martin, she's blind. There would just be no room for her in certain spaces without reasonable accommodations. But if she had reasonable accommodations, she could thrive and be extremely successful. And she's currently pursuing her PhD. She owns her own business now. Without accessibility, I think she would be left on the margins of society. And so that's what I think about in terms of DEI, the big picture. I don't really hear a big push for students with disabilities.
So there's a book called No Pity, if anyone is more interested in the era. I feel like there was an era of that followed the disability civil rights era. I mean, sorry, that followed the civil rights era for people of color, and I think people of color led the way for people with disabilities when you look at civil rights. But this book, No Pity, is a written by a journalist, and it's a accumulation of all the stories of advocacy that happened shortly after the civil rights movement.
Mhm,
When you think of including people with color, um, and it really gives a good picture. The stories in there are, I mean, it started with there were lots of people with polio, and so you had a lot of people, during the polio epidemic, and you had a lot of people with physical disabilities, and these people had brains that were amazing. They could read, spell, they could think very logically about anything. Their intellect was fine, but physically they just could not actually have literal access to a university, physical access to things. So it started with them, and then they are the ones that basically started this critical disability theory that I talked to you about
mhm,
before. And they actually had to name the discrimination, the ableism. Ableism was, so she is was aligned with racism. If
mhm.
you were discriminating against people with disabilities, you were an ableist. They had to name it. They had to um, define it, and systematically uh, try to defeat it. So overcome it, I guess I should say. And then after that, you also had the stories of like Gallaudet University, deaf president now. I mean, these were big uprisings, big marches. I mean, all that you see with the civil rights movement,
Yep.
it happened with people with disabilities. The special education law was an outcome of all of that advocacy and those marches and those sit-ins. And what's the last thing that these senators want is a bunch of people with disabilities sitting on their doorstep with a sit-in, like
Right. Marching
that.
down their
That just
halls.
looks, yeah,
Right.
that picture, right? But yeah, I mean, I think there is, if you look at it more, it might not, you don't know, we don't have the movies about it, of we shall overcome, songs and stuff like that. But if you really look back in the history, there are several of these kind of incidents where, people with disabilities came together to overcome some of the barriers that they face.
Yeah, I before you got here, I laid a little bit of that groundwork as it related to that, as you mentioned, a companion to the civil rights movement. So I'm going to move forward a little bit. Before I do that, though, I want to give a special shout out to Mr. Caldwell Pope, who came up to join us on stage, and Tahira and Seneb. Thank you guys for joining us in the live room as well. Um, Damu, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right, but I do want to pass the mic to you. Please introduce yourself and share with us what's come up for you so far.
Good morning. Kind of trying to get ready for summer camp I'm doing. My name is Damu. I'm a sixth grade math teacher in Cleveland. Uh, my work don't stop, so I'm doing two summer camps so I don't get a break. But I'm also disabled. I have a physical disability, and I dealt with that while I was in school. I had a IEP and a 504 at one point to help me graduate, even though a lot of the things that they suggested I really didn't need, and my brain is so hyper independent. I was like, I don't need extra time on the test. I got it. I don't need an adjusted desk. I'll just get out my wheelchair and go over there. But being a teacher and a student on both sides of the disability thing is really interesting. And one thing that you guys have been talking about that I'm really appreciative of is the history and the connection to the civil rights movement. I don't think that gets enough credit as to how a lot of these issues are intersectional, to take Kimberly Crenshaw's words for it. And it's kind of hilarious how in the clip, the lady was saying that theories are what did she call them? Oppression points.
Hmm.
And I don't get how identity markers or social economic markers or identity markers determined to be oppression markers. And that kind of lets you know exactly what the fight or who the fight is against. It's people that look at our identities and automatically think that we're lesser than or that we can't compete. So I feel like there's really a war on equity right now instead of I guess a support of equity to ensure that every American has the opportunity to exist to succeed. So I just really want to thank you guys for the room and thank you guys for the space and the information that you've been sharing in the room. And with that, I'll say peace.
No, Damu, I see Nazi. Let me give him a little bit of flowers. So, first of all, welcome to the space. We are here specifically for you, my friend. So, as you're getting ready in the morning, please continue to come back and join us, even if you're in listen only mode. Like, this is like you're our guy. So, we're glad that you're here. And I will pass it over to Nazi. Go ahead. You can take it.
I wanted to follow up on something you mentioned earlier when you said that disability is objective. And as a person who daily is diagnosing disabilities, I have to say, I have to object. It is not objective. There is a fine line between disability and no disability and not, enable.
Hmm.
And like I said, that's why you need that critical disability theory lens in order to understand what disability is. And once you do use that lens, I think all you can see is the weakness in our society,
Mm.
that society creates uh, this society creates barriers to disable people. I mean, if we just took down these barriers and didn't need labels, we didn't need to worry about going around classifying and categorizing people into our classist society mind. Like it really just needs to be, what do you need? How can I help you? You are my fellow human. And when it comes to resources, I think people with disabilities and people without disabilities understand that sometimes you do need those labels to overcome those barriers or those lack of resources. But we also as a society have to find ways to appropriate more resources. Some of the resources are just really simple and not very expensive. And if we invest more in each other, then we won't. I mean, like, take for example preschools. It's way cheaper to pay for preschools than it is for prisons,
That's
but
a fact.
it's way cheaper to pay for literacy programs than it is for prisons. But we don't want to give money to preschools and for literacy, and then we end up with people in prisons. Like, but that's how I sometimes I wonder if that's how society wants it. They want people. They want a classist society. They want to be part of this high class. As I said, it is not. You have people with learning disabilities, people with ADHD, people with high functioning autism.
Hmm.
They call these the sort of invisible disabilities, where you don't see it on the outside, but something about that person's uh, abilities is is stopping them from achieving what they want to achieve. So I don't think it's as objective as you're thinking.
I want to jump in here because let's take a step back. What we're doing right now is important. And so, I sorry, Nazi, I just muted you because of the feedback. I want to offer a call to action. I know that we're on this live app and maybe it's kind of hard to get people to on board, but Nazi and I spoke about this very thing just in our immediately previous conference on June 4th. So share is my call to action. These are important conversations, and part of why I decided to do the simulcast on YouTube is because we've got to get beyond these clubhouse walls. I appreciate everybody who's here, but this is the type of conversation that needs to spread wider and farther, and we've got a lot of important conversations coming. So if you could share the YouTube link with somebody, I am still at 97 subscribers. So my goal is to try to get to 100 subscribers before this show is over today, and I've got about 4 minutes to do so. So if three of you who have not subscribed can slide over to the YouTube channel and click that subscription button, I would at least have reached my goal for today. Yay! Um, yeah, Nazi, you're right. The critical disability theory is an important lens to include those who are generally marginalized. I see Leticia just slid in and becoming Dr. Adwa. Glad to see you here as well. Both folks are, both of them are deeply immersed in education. What I want to do, because we're kind of, I want to slowly land this plane because I know this is a morning show and we've all got to get ready for our day. When we come back together, and the next time that we will come together will be on Sunday. That's 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern time. That's in 2 days' time from now. I want to use, because we've laid this groundwork, I may kind of start the conversation with that civil rights connection, but I really want to go deep into what happened in 1990. That was really the landmark paradigm shift, because the cases have been laid out and we've kind of discussed some of those court cases, but it was in 1990 that we see the IDEA Act, which was a reauthorized version of EAHCA, which stands for I don't have it right here in front of me, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, which actually took place in 1975, right? So that was sort of the original version. But in 1990, we see IDEA, which brings in new language, which I'll introduce on Sunday. And it also was the same year that the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed under George Bush, 1990. So that's what pushed things like the cutouts that we see on curbs all over the place. You know, that's what pushed the demand for an elevator in buildings now. You know, that sort of a thing. And so that's where I want to go. And then, of course, on Sunday, because we have 2 full hours, I also want to get into what it looks like today. I want to build that bridge between DEI and the critical theory. And that's where, I don't know if you can make it, Nazi, but perhaps we can get into critical disability theory for the formal conference and some of the outcomes as well. I want to share data with you guys about what is the reality for students with disabilities today when it looks at graduation rate, when it looks at even the more narrow groups, right? What if you're a Black student with a disability? What kind of experience do you have? And so I'm so glad that Damu came to share his lived experience, and I hope that you can do so at the formal conference as well. So with that being said, I'm laying the groundwork for Sunday, and I hope that you guys will join me. Given our time, I would like to create space for folks to land. So, becoming Leticia, if you want to come up and share, this will be your last chance to do so. Sami, you've also came up as well, so I'll send you an invitation. Let's do a bit of a round robin around those who are here on the stage. If there is something worthy of remark, maybe you can summarize your experience into a sentence, or if you were to tell somebody about what you experienced today, how would you do so? Your final thoughts is what I'm going for. So I'm going to give greetings first to Leticia, and then we'll work our way up the stage. Damu, One Chapter, Nazi, and Carla in that order. So Leticia, greetings. I know you haven't heard much, but if you want to speak to the title and introduce yourself, I'd invite you to do that at this time. The mic is yours.
Good morning. Hey everyone. I know my audio is terrible again. I'm in the car. I'm so sorry, Hassan. But just wanted to send you some love, and I wish I was here earlier and I listened to the replay. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Leticia. She's a regular part of our community. She joins us on the commute. You can do the same. So as you're getting ready, please join this community and be part of our conversation. Damu, final thoughts. What comes up for you? How would you share what you've experienced with someone else? If you're ready to share your final thought, the mic is yours, sir.
I read in a book from a master's program recently that is way easier to build up children to become whole rather than trying to fix broken adults. So that's going back to what Sister Nazi had said earlier, and that's what I'll leave with.
That's a bar, my bro. Appreciate that share. I'm gonna hold on to that one. I might, I might have to steal that and be like, Damu told me this. All right, let me keep the mic moving though, and I'll come to you in just a second, Nazi. One chapter in 1 hour. What would be your final thought or your remarkable statement?
Sure. I'm just grateful for this space. Want to keep the conversation going. I'm an advocate for my girl, um, my daughter. She is a special person. I don't mind calling her my special girl. And she's capable of much more than I think her teachers credit her with. And so I'm going to continue advocating for her, continue, dropping in as a substitute teacher wherever I can, not just to support her, but to see what's happening in these special education spaces to support all of our kids who are exceptional in their various ways, whether it's something mental or physical or even emotional. As it's been stated, they're human. They're citizens of this country. They are due all the privileges
Mhm.
that the rest of us enjoy. That's my share. Thanks.
That's a great share. And I wish we could mandate that all parents would spend 5 days in a classroom because I think that is the big veil, right? The bulletproof glass wall between the relationship of parents and families and schools and teachers. So let me not cook too much. Nazi, let me pass it over to you. Final thoughts?
Sorry, I keep unmuting and muting it. The mic is messed up on my,
Yeah,
that glitch that
it's a
it's
it's a
doing.
mess. Yeah, I
And
know
I
what
was
you're
trying
going
to
through.
figure, I can't even put anything in the chat. And I just wanted to say today is the Eid for Muslims. Eid Mubarak, everybody. We are, if you're Muslim, we're probably rushing off to go pray. So that's why I was a little bit late. I was very late joining and trying to get ready for our holiday. We only get 2 holidays a year, so this is the second one. But yeah, I'm going to head out. My mind is on Eid and Eid Mubarak for everyone. Blessings of this holiday for everyone who celebrates it. And that's all I can think of right now. So I'm going to head out.
Yeah, thank you for coming, especially on this holiday where it's a demonstration of your commitment to our community. So I just want to acknowledge you for that. And I don't know how to say it, but happy Eid Mubarak to you as well. And I would look
All right.
into it.
Thank you.
Would love to celebrate with you at some years. So keep me in mind
All
for the
right.
next one.
Okay.
Carla,
All
yes.
right. Bye.
Yeah, bye. Carla, you've been here since the beginning. Fellow co-moderator, thank you for coming. I wonder if you could summarize your experience in something remarkable. If you can, the mic is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This was probably one of the most insightful homerooms that I've been in, and what I heard from where I started to where I am now is, um, at the heart of it, we don't need just policies and checklists, and I think we focus a lot on that. But I still go back to this mind shift that we need to shift how we see each other, how we listen, and how we value people. So I imagine that even people coming with disabilities want understanding, not just awareness. When policies and procedures are being put in place, does anyone even bring people with disabilities to the table to say, what barriers are you facing that we may not be facing, and truly listen for understanding? I would imagine they want empathy over pity. It's easy to pity, but to empathize with someone, to really try to understand what they're going through and respect what they're going through. I think that just like people of color, they would want representation, right? Representation in leadership, media, things of that nature. Probably a safe space to be real. Um, and for us, I think we need the courage to unlearn the beliefs that we might have had, or the blind spots, as you put them, that we might have been living in. We need the courage to unlearn them and say, I didn't know, maybe I got that wrong. And then I think at the end of the day, God is love. We need love in action. And when we have that, then it's choosing to care, not just because it's on a checklist. So thank you for this.
Thank you for coming, Carla. For the good of the group, Carla is an amazing co-moderator, as you guys can see, but she also runs her own spaces. So if you're on the app, definitely, especially during this morning hour, Tuesdays, you will find Carla in a house called the Lighthouse. It's a space that I am a big fan of, and also do my best to support her space as often as I can. So she's on her journey, and please keep her in your thoughts and prayers, and support her space as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that you could find her at the Lighthouse on Tuesday morning, right around the same hour that we are here. In fact, she's part of the reason why I only go Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because I was like, I'm not gonna miss the Lighthouse. So we're gonna skip Tuesday and Thursday, okay? Because I got to be present for my girl. So with that being said, I'm going to give a remarkable moment also to Leticia, who's joining us on YouTube. She said diverse perspectives, historical context, advocacy, humility to learn more, and the need to share among others. This is exactly what we're about here at the Educator's House, and you are welcome here. And so I stand in deep gratitude for you. If you've made it this far, please subscribe to the channel, check out what we're doing on a long-term basis, and get excited because on this Sunday, we've got our final stand on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then we're going to move into this intersection of technology and child development. And so I'm excited to see where that goes. But as you can see, we are here. And so all members of the education community, whether you're a professional educator, a parent of a school-age child, or a community member that's concerned about these issues, you are welcome here. And this is a space where we're really going to unpack. And so please tell a friend. There's somebody that you know, whether that's your school bestie or a personal friend of yours or a family member, or a colleague that is interested in the same issues as you. And so think about that person and share what's going on here so that we can continue to grow and spread. Okay, guys, with that said, I'm going to go ahead and land this plane. So we're going to close this room down in 5. Find somebody that you were impressed with today and drop them a follow. Damu's going to get my follow. Bow, bow, bow. 4, this community is for you. So just keep in mind that we are here on a growth phase to bring issues of education to the broader community. So anything that you could do to help us with that portion of our mission is greatly appreciated. We're closing this room down in 3. This is not a me thing. This is a we thing. So I'm very intentional about centering the voices of you. So if you've got an instinct, you've got a story to share, you've got something to say, this is the safe space. So please come on up and join the conversation. We're shutting this room down in 2. I am here to serve. So if you've got some topic ideas, ways that I can improve this space and make it more productive, more safe, and more valuable for you as members of the community, please let me know because I am here to grow and to learn. And finally, I'm closing this room down in 1. I always say this when I close the room, you're the one. You're the most important part of this process. And so make sure that you give unto others of your overflow. Okay. Oftentimes, we as educators, we drain ourselves out of the bottom of the bucket because we are so service minded. But I say, take care of yourself first, and then you can give of your best rather than being stretched so thin, especially now that we're landing the plane of the school year. Child, I know it's frazzle dazzle time. Okay. We got some of you probably can count the days and hours that might be left. So I can sympathize with where you are, and we are here for you. So I'm excited that you guys are here, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace, everybody. Peace, peace. All right, YouTube, we made it. I also appreciate your dedication and your consistency. So thank you guys for being here. If you haven't, if this is the first one that you've seen, you may benefit from going back and checking out the playlist on DEI. I've hit it from so many angles, and I have really done a thorough investigation of what DEI is and how it intersects our education community. I'm excited for what's going to happen on Sunday with our special guest, Tiffany Martin. Powerful, powerful woman. And I think she's got a serious story to tell as she shares her academic journey as a blind woman, navigating both her academics and her professional world. And then we've got a new topic coming up. So Leticia will appreciate this. I put myself on a 5-week journey this is week number 4. And so after we close out DEI, it pushes me to open up the new topic. And as many of you guys may know, it takes 21 days to set a habit. So I have crossed over my 21 day. Rather than take a break after the 5th week, I'm going to keep this party moving, stay consistent, stay present so that this community can continue to grow, thrive, and have access to this important information. So we're going to be bringing up our new topic, our new multi-part series on the issue of screen time. Excuse me, I have concerns about Roblox. I have concerns about Coco Melon. I have concerns about Fortnite because I don't think these products are designed for children. I think they're designed for children as products. I also have concerns about what's going on with with the algorithm and how it is moving our children in what I would consider a manipulative way, which means I also have to be critical of screen time at the schools because kids are oftentimes on the screen at the school. They get back on the screen when they get home. I mean, it really is. It's worth talking about. So let's talk about it. If you haven't done so, please subscribe, please share what's going on. If you've made it this far, like you're interested in what we're doing. So we would appreciate your support as we grow, and we will continue to march along these important issues. So thank you guys.